This is not a normal law school admissions cycle. You are stepping into one of the most crowded, most competitive, and most unpredictable application cycles we've seen in the last 10 years. So if you treat it like business as usual, you're going to lose your edge. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. I've watched the trends rise and fall, but every once in a while, something breaks the pattern. And this is one of those moments. And you've got to understand why, because your entire admissions strategy depends on it. Now let's look at the numbers because they are jaw-dropping. For the August 2025 LSAT, over 34,000 people have registered. To put that in perspective, last August only had about 16,000 registrants. That means we're looking at a 112% year-over-year increase, a number so big it almost looks like a typo. But it's real. And even if we apply the usual melt rate, where 10 to 20% of people don't actually show up on test day, we're still left with more than 27,000 actual test takers conservatively. That is one of the largest LSAT administrations in the last 15 years. And no, this is not because of pandemic-related deferrals or a one-off spike. Those are explanations people throw around when they want to downplay what's happening. But this time it's different, because this spike isn't happening in isolation. It's backed up by a surge in law school admissions forum traffic and discussion, a massive uptick in inquiries to my LSAT prep company, and a steady increase in test registrations across multiple months, not just August. For context, September and October are also tracking higher than normal. This is not just more people taking the LSAT. It's more people entering the law school admissions process with a real plan to apply. They're not dabbling here. They're trying to break into law school at a time of economic uncertainty, and they're serious about it. Now let's break down why that matters. More test takers means more score reports. Even if a third of them cancel, that still leaves a large pool of valid, competitive LSAT scores entering the application cycle. And law schools care about these numbers because LSAT scores influence their rankings. More scores also means more competition at key thresholds. A couple of years back, a 168 might put you above the median at a number of top-tier schools. Now, it barely gets you to the median or puts you below the median. And more applicants also means earlier score cutoffs. When schools are flooded with strong applications early, they get pickier because they don't have to take risks on borderline applicants. They can afford to wait. And one more point I want to make to you, the volume isn't just about quantity, it's about behavior. A lot of these test takers aren't just showing up once. They're already planning multiple test dates. They're aiming for September, October, November, even January, whenever they think they can maximize their score and snag a scholarship. In other words, this is not just a traffic jam for those taking the August LSAT. This is the beginning of a multi-month, high-pressure LSAT marathon where strong scorers are fine-tuning their applications, pushing for merit aid, and squeezing every point out of the test they can. So if you've been thinking, I'll just take it once and submit, understand this. You're not just competing against more people, you're competing against more prepared, more strategic, and more retake-ready applicants than ever before. That is the game now, so you want to plan accordingly. The surge in LSAT registrations is just the first domino. The second is law school applications themselves, and they're already climbing. According to LSAC, law school applications last cycle rose nearly 20% year over year. To put that in context, for the last decade, a 5% bump would spark headlines and speculation. But 20%, that is an admissions shockwave. And the early data says this cycle could match or even beat that. Right now, we're tracking toward another 5-10% increase in the number of total applicants. That might sound modest compared to last year, but let me show you why it matters even more this time. More applicants doesn't just mean more noise. It means more pressure on schools to protect their metrics. Every ABA-accredited law school is playing two simultaneous games. First, they want to admit strong applicants who will succeed and graduate. And second, they want to protect or raise their LSAT and GPA medians to maintain or improve their US News ranking. And when application volume spikes, Schools have choices. They don't have to take risks anymore, and they don't need to bend their standards. They don't need to admit splitters just to fill seats. They're going to go straight for the strongest candidates they can find. Highest LSAT, highest GPA, clean personal statement, and ideally submitted early in the cycle. And that's where the real squeeze happens. Think about it like musical chairs. If there are 1,000 seats and 1,000 players, you're fine. If there are 1,000 seats and 1,200 players, you've got to be faster and more strategic. But if there are 1,000 seats and 2,000 players, and some of them are showing up early, retaking for higher LSAT scores, and applying with polished apps, now it's not a game of do I get in? It's a game of do I get in with money, or do I take out $200,000 in loans? And if you've been watching closely, you're going to notice something else happening in the background. Class sizes at most law schools are not expanding. They're not opening up hundreds of new spots to absorb all these new applicants. Why? Because more students means more demand on professors, more demand on job placement offices and bar passage rates. Schools don't want to tank their employment numbers just to admit more people, which means the competition gets tighter, not looser, especially in the top 50 schools. So let's do the math. Let's say that 60,000 people applied this year, and 30% of them are aiming for the top 30 schools. That's 18,000 people fighting for maybe 6,000 spots. And if the average applicant is retaking, rewriting, and pushing to optimize their file, you can't afford to be casual about this. This isn't just about getting in. It's about how you position yourself on timing, on your LSAT score, on your school list, and on financial aid. The more crowded the field, the more deliberate your moves need to be. So don't get distracted by the wrong question. Don't ask, will I be okay? But ask, am I building a strategy that puts me ahead of the wave? Because this year, average is just not going to cut it. Now, if you're wondering why LSAT numbers this cycle are exploding, it's not just one single cause. It is a perfect storm of economic pressures, policy changes, and LSAT reforms all hitting at once. The first big reason is that the job market for college grads is broken. If you graduated recently with a degree in political science, English, philosophy, sociology, basically anything that's not STEM, you've probably realized the job market doesn't care. You spent 4 years building a 3.7 GPA, joining clubs, and maybe doing unpaid internships, and now what? You're getting ghosted after submitting 50 plus applications, and you're competing with people who have 2 years of experience for an entry-level job, and you're seeing salaries like $38,000 in cities where rent is over $2,000 a month. So what do smart, ambitious, and frustrated college grads do? They look for a reset button. And for a lot of people, law school looks like a structured way out. It's going to give you a higher lifetime earning potential, a professional degree will raise your social status, and it's a clearer path to a real job. This is what economists call counter-cyclical demand. When the job market dries up, grad school numbers go up. We saw it after the 2008 recession. We saw it again in the early pandemic years, and we're seeing it again now. The second big factor is that the LSAT has gotten easier, or at least it's gotten less scary due to the removal of logic games. For decades, logic games were the single biggest fear factor on the LSAT. The diagramming, the hypotheticals, the if L's in slot 3 and R is not next to S, then what happens? This section, logic games, made people panic. And it's the reason many test takers delayed applying or they avoided the LSAT altogether. But since last year, logic games is gone. They removed it entirely. The new LSAT is now 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 reading comp section, and 1 unscored extra section of either reasoning or reading comp. That's it. No diagramming, no sequencing, no worlds. And suddenly, thousands of potential test takers who'd written off the LSAT entirely are coming back. They're saying, wait, no more logic games? I could do this now. It lowered the psychological barrier to entry, and that is huge. Just look at the numbers. August registrations doubled year over year. That is not a coincidence. So pull together a terrible job market combined with a test that's a lot less scary. That's why the floodgates have opened. That's why the forums are filled up with anxious first-timers and determined retakers, and why application numbers are rising again even after a 20% surge last year. This is the new landscape, and if you understand it, you can use it to your advantage. So let's stop talking about the system for a second and talk about you, because this is where most people make mistakes. They'll hear about the spike in LSAT registrations and the surge in applications, the job market collapse, and they'll panic. They think, well, I guess I'm screwed. That mindset is how people end up with 6 figures of debt and no job. The real winners this cycle are not going to be the smartest people, but they'll be the most strategic. Let's break down the 3 critical points you need to understand if you're applying this year. First, competition is rising, especially at the top. Now, not all 34,000 August LSAT test takers will finish their applications. Not all of them are going to score well, and some are just going to bomb it and walk away from law school altogether. But enough of them will get competitive scores to move the needle, especially at the most desirable schools. Now, let's say just 20% of August test takers scored 165 and above. That is 6,800 people flooding the cycle with strong scores. And many of them are targeting the same schools as you. Top 14, top 20, top 50, looking for merit aid, prestige, and job security. Even if you wouldn't call yourself prestige obsessed, your competitors are, and that means you're playing in a more crowded pool, whether you like it or not. Meanwhile, schools are under pressure to raise their LSAT and GPA medians to climb the US News rankings or at least maintain their current positions. Now, here's what that looks like in practice. Take Northwestern, for example. Their median LSAT in 2015 was a 168. Today, it's a 172. Their median GPA back then was a 375. Now, it's a 395. Let that sink in for a minute. They've got almost a 4.0 GPA median. Schools are not just looking for qualified anymore. They want polished, competitive, above median, bonus points for work experience, clean narratives, and early submission. If you're not aiming to be one of the strongest applicants they see in October, you're already playing catch up. You also want to remember that your first LSAT probably won't be your last. This part might hurt your ego, but it's important. Most people don't get their best LSAT score on their first try. And with the stakes this high, higher medians, fewer scholarships, $200,000 loan caps, you can't afford to roll the dice once and hope. Let's do the math. Let's say you score a 160 in August. Not terrible, could get you into a T50 school, but if you got a 167, that could put you in range for serious merit scholarships, maybe even half off tuition or a full ride. That is the difference between graduating with $200,000 in debt or $60,000, between saying yes to a public interest job or feeling forced into big law for 10 years just to survive your loan payments. This is not about trying your best. It's about building a smart, aggressive timeline. Here's what that looks like. You take it in August and you retake in September, October, maybe November if you need to. And retaking doesn't mean you failed. It means you're playing to win. Now, you do want to apply early or you risk getting left behind. Law school admissions is rolling. That means schools read and review applications as they come in, not all at once. So when a school says their median LSAT is a 168, that's not just a fact, that's a moving target. If they already have 200 admits at 170 and above, they're going to be less motivated to give your 167 a close look if you're applying in January. But if you apply early, in September or October, you're in that first wave. You get more attention because there are more spots available, and you have more leverage for scholarships. Now, a question I get a lot is, should I wait to start my apps until I get my LSAT score back? No, you absolutely should not. There is zero downside to starting early. Here's what you can do right now. You want to ask for letters of rec now because they take time. You want to start working on your personal statement and get it reviewed. You want to polish your resume and fill out all those general sections of the app. Then, when your LSAT score comes back, you hit submit immediately. No delay, no scramble. You don't need to wait to work on your applications. You could start now and be ready. Now, let's address the quiet thought a lot of people have right now. They're asking, should I just wait until next year when things calm down? It sounds reasonable because you see the data, record-breaking LSAT registrations, application surges, scholarship pressure, and your brain goes, maybe I'll just sit this one out. let the dust settle, and next year will be easier, right? Here's the truth. Yes, eventually the cycle will cool down, but not this year. If you're banking on some magical dip in the future that gives you less competition, lower medians, and more scholarships, you're going to be disappointed. Let's break this down with a simple concept, the pendulum. In law school admissions, application volume moves in cycles, up, then down, then back up again. But here's what most people forget. The pendulum doesn't pause at the top. It swings past it before coming back. And right now, we're still mid-swing, maybe even still on the upswing. That means add up to more pressure and more urgency, not less. And if you're hoping everyone else is going to be scared off and sit out, they're not. In fact, the opposite is happening. People who would have casually taken the LSAT are now planning to take it 3 times. People who might have submitted in January are polishing their applications now. People are going on Reddit, comparing scholarship offers, and optimizing their cycle. The bar is rising, and people are responding. And yes, the bubble will pop eventually, but you can't base your law school strategy on what might happen a year from now. You've got 2 choices: sit on the sidelines and wait, or play to win now. If you play to win now, you're not a victim of the cycle, you are a competitor in it. And if you do everything right, you apply early with a high LSAT and polished materials, you still can get in with scholarship money and come out ahead of 90% of the crowd. Not because the system is fair, but because you understand how to work it better than most. Yes, this is a tough cycle, but tough doesn't mean impossible. It just means you can't rely on hope. You need data, timing, preparation, and flexibility. So stop wondering if things are going to get easier later. They might, but they might not. What matters is that you're ready when it counts. At this point, you have 2 options. You stop watching this video, you stop listening to this podcast, and you go back to scrolling Reddit while you're telling yourself you'll figure it out later, or you get serious, take control, and build a plan that actually gives you a competitive edge this cycle. If you're choosing that second option, here is your exact playbook. Not generic advice, not motivation, but I'm going to give you a real tactical plan. Your first step is to lock in your LSAT test date and a backup date. This might sound obvious, but most people mess this up. They think to themselves, I'll register after I feel ready. But that's getting it backwards. If you register for a test date, that creates urgency and gives you structure. You don't get motivated and then build the plan. You commit first, then you execute. So right now, I want you to pick a primary test date, either August, September, or October. Then pick a backup of October, November, or January, even if you don't think you'll need it. Treat your LSAT like a launch. You need a main window and a backup window. NASA doesn't wing it, and you shouldn't either. Then you treat LSAT prep like a job, and this is where 90% of applicants fail. They study when they feel like it, squeezing it around work or school, then they wonder why their scores plateau. But you're not going to do that. Here's what serious LSAT prep looks like. You block off 15-20 hours a week minimum. You use deep work principles, meaning no phone, no distractions. You drill your weaknesses relentlessly, not just the sections you like. Then you take full-length practice tests under timed conditions and do full reviews of every single mistake, not just checking the answer key and moving on. And don't just practice blindly, use the real, actual, official LSAT format. Because yes, the LSAT has changed. And if you are using outdated materials, you're wasting time. No more logic games, no diagramming, 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 reading comp section, and 1 unscored extra section of either reasoning or reading comp. You also want to start working on your applications now. You don't want to wait till you feel ready. Start now, because you can complete everything before your LSAT score comes back. Ask for your letters of rec now. Start drafting your personal statement now. Update your resume now. Fill out all the general app info in LSAC now as well. Then you want to build your financial strategy around your scholarships, not loans, because that's where the real money is. Remember, federal student loan borrowing is now capped at $200,000. That is your ceiling, and you can only do $50,000 a year. And so if you're going to law school over the course of 3 years, which is the standard, you're capped at $150,000. And remember that private loans are expensive and they're going to be less forgiving. So what this means for you is that the LSAT is not just a tool for admissions, it is your weapon for scholarships. The higher your score, the more money you earn in scholarships, period. And a score increase of just 3 to 5 points could be worth $50,000 to $150,000 in tuition savings. So you want to target law schools where your score is at or above the 75th percentile. You can use scholarship calculators and publicly available 509 reports to set your targets and be ready to negotiate once offers come in. And if your score isn't what you want it to be ready to retake because it means unlocking more financial aid. So let me tell you what's going to happen over the next few months. The Reddit threads are going to get louder. The Discord servers are going to explode with anxiety, and people are going to start posting graphs, score distributions, GPA comparisons, chances posts, and doom scroll worthy stats like only 5% of applicants got into X law school with your numbers. It's going to feel like everyone else is smarter, faster, better prepared, and scoring higher than you. And if you let yourself get sucked into all that drama, you're going to lose. Not because the cycle is unbeatable, but because you took your eye off your own plan. Here's what winners do differently. They don't waste time obsessing over what other people are doing. They use that time to study, plan, and execute. Don't let some stranger's 178 on Reddit shake your confidence. Instead ask, what can I do today to improve my score by just 3 points? Don't complain about how hard the cycle is. Build a system to succeed within that. Because you've only got to control 5 things: your LSAT test date, your study plan, your application timing, your school list, and your strategy for retakes and scholarships. That is it. That's the race you are competing in. Not what someone else scored, not whether someone else got into Yale with a 168 and a trust fund, just your own race, because there's always going to be noise. The people who win this cycle are going to be the ones who stay focused throughout it. And that means building a real plan, executing consistently, and studying, yes, when you're tired, editing your essays when you're burnt out, and submitting when others are still tweaking the fonts. You don't need a miracle. You've just got to ignore the chaos and run your own race. And if you do, you're going to win in ways most people never will.